The smell of bleach doesn't belong in a cookie, and neither does a son's smile when he's counting on your death. Jordan set the plate on the table with the kind of careful pride I hadn't seen since he was 6, presenting me with finger-painted Mother's Day cards. He grinned, gap-toothed in my memory but perfectly straight-teethed now, at 44. When your son bakes your cookies for the first time in his life, you're supposed to feel proud. I felt my pulse quicken for all the wrong reasons. The kitchen glowed in afternoon gold, the lake beyond the windows like a postcard of serenity. Mom, try one. Tell me what you think. His voice was warm honey, but underneath ran something off-key, like a piano note played half a step wrong. Martha, his wife, poured tea with her usual grace, the china cups catching light. He's been baking all morning for you, Mrs. Walter. I smiled, lifting one of the cookies, but when I brought it close, that faint metallic tang, almost buried under chocolate and vanilla, made every nerve I'd spent 50 years as a nurse learning to trust my instincts about what belongs in a body. That afternoon, my instincts told me something didn't belong in those cookies, or in my son's eyes. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get to the story. Without Martha or Jordan noticing, while pretending to admire the golden brown edges, I set my cookie down and nudged the plate toward Martha. You first, dear. Guests before grannies. She laughed, that soft bell-like sound, and took a bite. 3 minutes later, the gut-wrenching sight of Martha's face going slack confirmed what my medical instincts had screamed. My daughter-in-law was convulsing on Jordan's pristine kitchen tile, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth, her pupils blown wide as midnight. Jordan was shouting with a desperation that seemed genuine, dropping to his knees beside his wife of 7 years, while I dialed 911 with hands that trembled as much from shock as from the adrenaline flooding my 72-year-old veins. After 50 years of nursing, of stitching wounds and catching babies and holding dying hands, I never thought I would witness my own son trying to kill me. She's dying. Jordan yelled, and tears streamed down his face, real or rehearsed, I couldn't tell anymore. Martha, please. Mom, do something. But as I knelt beside her, checking her pulse with the automatic precision that had never left me, something in my analytical mind, the same mind that had diagnosed rare conditions and caught medication errors before they killed, began processing details that didn't fit. Why had Jordan insisted so strongly that I eat the cookies while they were still warm? Why had he baked exactly a dozen when he knew Martha was watching her sugar and rarely indulged? And why, despite his hysterical sobs, did he keep glancing at me instead of focusing entirely on his convulsing wife? The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes that stretched like 7 hours. While they worked frantically to stabilize Martha, inserting N4 and checking her vitals with controlled urgency, one of them, a young woman with kind eyes, asked me what Martha had eaten or drunk in the last few hours. Cookies, I replied automatically, then corrected myself. Actually, just one cookie. I didn't eat mine. Who baked them? I looked at Jordan, who was sobbing theatrically while the paramedics prepared Martha for transport, his hands covering his face in what looked like genuine despair. My son. The paramedic wrote something in her notebook and looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Concern? Suspicion? We're taking her to County General. Can you bring whatever's left of the cookies? For testing. Jordan immediately moved toward the plate. I'll get them ready. I'll handle it, I said, with a firmness that surprised us both. In the kitchen, while Jordan followed Martha's gurney to the ambulance, his voice carrying back in broken pleas of, hold on, sweetheart, please hold on, I examined those cookies with completely new eyes. 12 perfect circles of chocolate chip innocence. Golden brown, soft-centered, the kind you'd photograph for a magazine spread on cozy family moments. I'd taught Jordan to crack eggs when he was 8, to measure flour when he was 10, but he'd never shown interest in baking after that. Said it was too fussy, that he preferred ordering takeout to standing in a kitchen. Until today. Until the day after I'd told him about the retirement community. Until the week after I'd mentioned updating my will with my lawyer. I picked up the cookie I'd almost eaten, broke it in half, and there, barely visible against the brown dough, were tiny crystalline specks that caught the light wrong. My stomach went cold. I'd seen residue like that before, years ago, in the cardiac ward. Digitalis. Or something similar. Something that stopped hearts, that mimicked natural failure in older patients, that dissolved quickly and left little trace if you didn't know to look. The kind of thing that had gone missing from hospital storage 20 years ago, the same year my husband, Jordan's father, died suddenly after eating a stew Jordan had helped prepare. The same year I dismissed the faint metallic smell in that kitchen as grief playing tricks on my senses. I wrapped the remaining cookies carefully in plastic, my hands steadier now, my nurse's training overriding the mother's horror trying to claw its way up my throat. Through the kitchen window, I watched Jordan pace beside the ambulance, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing in what looked like panic. But I'd raised him. I knew his tells. The way his left eye twitched when he lied about breaking the neighbor's window at 12. The way he stood too still when he'd forged my signature on a permission slip at 16. The way he smiled with his mouth but not his eyes when he'd introduced me to Martha 7 years ago, saying, "She's perfect, Mom. You'll love her." And I had loved her. Gentle Martha, who worked at the library and brought me first edition mysteries for my birthday. Martha, who'd been seeing a therapist, I'd noticed the appointment cards in her purse, but had brushed off my concerned questions with, just some stress from work. Martha, who might die because I'd been too polite to trust my instincts. The ambulance pulled away, sirens cutting through the golden afternoon, and Jordan came back inside. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders shaking. He reached for me, and decades of maternal instinct almost made me open my arms. Almost. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. "I don't know what happened. I don't. What if she doesn't make it? What if?" "The hospital will take care of her," I said, stepping back from his embrace, keeping the kitchen island between us. "They'll run tests. They'll find out exactly what caused this." Something flickered across his face. Too quick to name, too familiar to ignore. "Of course," he said, wiping his eyes. "Of course they will." In the reflection of the kitchen window, I watched him watch me, and for the first time in 44 years of motherhood, I wasn't sure if my son's grief was real, or if he was simply mourning a plan that had failed. I picked up my purse, the bag of cookies secure inside. "I should get to the hospital." "Follow Martha." "I'll drive you." "No." The word came out sharper than I'd intended. I softened it with a weak smile. "You're too upset. I'll take a taxi." "You should clean up here. In case the police want to see the kitchen." His face went very still. "The police?" "Standard procedure," I said, moving toward the door, every instinct screaming at me to get out, get away, get somewhere public and safe. "For accidental poisonings. They'll want to rule out contamination. Make sure everything was properly prepared." At 67, after single-handedly raising this boy through scraped knees and science projects and teenage rebellion, I never imagined I would fear him. But as I walked out into the cooling evening, leaving my son standing alone in his perfect kitchen with his perfect cookies and his perfectly planned murder, I understood something that made my chest ache. The child I'd loved with every exhausted fiber of my being had disappeared years ago, replaced by a stranger who'd learned to smile with my own smile while plotting my death. And if I wanted to survive the next 48 hours, would need to stop being his mother and start being the woman who'd spent 5 decades learning how to save lives, including, finally, my own. The hospital waiting room smelled like industrial disinfectant and bad coffee, scents that had once meant purpose and competence, back when I wore scrubs instead of sitting helplessly in a plastic chair at 2 in the morning. Martha was stable. That single word, stable, felt like a reprieve I didn't deserve. The ICU doctor, a tired woman in her 40s with kind eyes, had pulled me aside around midnight. "We're treating for cardiac glycoside poisoning, likely digitalis." Her heart rate dropped to 32 beats per minute in the ambulance. Another 10 minutes. She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Will she recover? If the exposure was single incident, yes. Her age works in her favor. We'll monitor for 72 hours, but I'm cautiously optimistic. The doctor paused, choosing her words carefully. The police will want to speak with you. This kind of poisoning, it's rarely accidental. I nodded, numb, and she squeezed my shoulder before disappearing back through the double doors that separated the living from the barely living. Jordan arrived an hour later, eyes swollen, hair disheveled, carrying that same desperate energy that had filled the kitchen. He collapsed into the chair beside me, and for a moment, just a moment, I wanted to comfort him the way I had when he was small and afraid of thunderstorms. "They won't let me see her," he said, voice cracking. "They said family only after 8 a.m. She needs rest. I need to tell her I'm sorry." His hands twisted together in his lap, knuckles white. "I should have been more careful. I should have. I don't know, checked the ingredients, made sure everything was." "Jordan." I kept my voice gentle, clinical. "How long have you been baking?" He looked at me, confused. "What? You said you've been practicing. When did you start?" A pause, too long. "A few weeks ago. I wanted to surprise you." "What recipe did you use?" "Just something I found online." "Mom, why does that matter?" Before I could answer, 2 police officers approached, a young man with a notebook and an older woman whose eyes moved over us with the same diagnostic precision I'd once used on incoming patients. "Mrs. Walter?" The woman's voice was professional, neutral. "I'm Detective Sarah Chen. This is Officer Morrison. We need to ask you a few questions about this afternoon." Jordan stood immediately. "I already told the other officers, I baked the cookies. It was my fault. I must have contaminated something, or used a bad ingredient, or..." "Mr. Walter, we'll speak with you separately in a moment." Detective Chen's tone didn't invite argument. She turned to me. "Mrs. Walter, can you walk me through exactly what happened?" I described the afternoon in the detached narrative style I'd learned during patient handoffs, times, observations, actions taken. When I mentioned switching the cookie with Martha, Chen's eyebrow lifted fractionally. "Why did you do that?" "Instinct," I said. The smell was wrong. Metallic, chemical. After 40 years in nursing, you learn to trust those warnings. "But you didn't warn anyone else?" The question hung there, accusatory. Jordan was staring at me, and something in his expression made my stomach clench. I thought I was being paranoid. Overly cautious. The lie tasted bitter. By the time I was certain, Martha had already. "She saved Martha's life," Jordan interrupted, his voice tight with emotion. "If Mom had eaten that cookie, she'd be the one in intensive care. Or worse." Detective Chen wrote something down. "Mr. Walter, you said you baked these cookies yourself?" "Yes." "And you used ingredients from your own kitchen?" "Yes, he hesitated. "Actually, I bought new chocolate chips. The expensive kind. I wanted them to be special for my mother." "Where did you purchase them?" "Sullivan's Market. On 5th Street. Last Thursday." Chen nodded, making notes. "We'll need the remaining cookies for analysis. And we'll need to examine your kitchen." "Of course," Jordan said quickly. Too quickly. "Whatever you need. I want to know what happened as much as you do." After the police left, Jordan turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. "You should go home, Mom. Get some rest. I'll stay here in case Martha wakes up." "I'll stay with you. Please." His hand touched my shoulder, and I felt myself flinch before I could stop it. He noticed. Something crossed his face, hurt, or maybe something else. "You've been up for 20 hours. You're not as young as you used to be. I need you healthy." The words were kind. The delivery was perfect. And every instinct I possessed screamed warning. "All right," I heard myself say. "But call me if anything changes." I took a taxi back to Jordan's house as dawn started painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. The lake was perfectly still, reflecting clouds like a mirror. Picture perfect. The same serenity that had greeted me yesterday, before cookies became weapons. The house key was under the ceramic frog by the front door, exactly where Martha always kept it despite my lectures about security. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it, the plate of remaining cookies gone, taken by the police, but the 3 mugs still on the counter where the paramedics had worked. I should have left. Should have gone to my hotel room, locked the door, and let the police handle everything. Instead, I found myself in Jordan's kitchen, staring at those mugs. The one Martha had used was marked with her lipstick, a soft pink she favored. The one meant for me sat untouched, a ring of dried chocolate around the rim. Jordan's mug, the control, the safe one, was empty, rinsed and placed in the sink. Why had he rinsed his but left ours? I began tidying, the way mothers do when they need their hands busy and their minds quiet. Loaded the dishwasher. Wiped down counters. Straightened the dish towels hanging from the oven handle. And then I saw it. Behind the expensive coffee maker Jordan and Martha had received as a wedding gift, wedged against the backsplash where it would be invisible unless you moved the machine, 3 small brown bottles, their labels scraped away to unreadable smears. My hands were shaking as I pulled them out. The caps were loose, as if recently opened and carelessly closed. Inside the first bottle, a fine white powder, crystalline under the kitchen light. The second, similar powder, but slightly yellowed. The third, empty, but a residue clung to the glass. I unscrewed the first cap and breathed in carefully, the way I'd been trained never to do in a lab but every nurse did anyway. The same metallic tang. The same chemical sharpness. The same smell that had filled our kitchen 20 years ago, the night my husband died. Robert. Jordan's father. Who had collapsed at the dinner table after eating beef stew, his heart giving out at 53 with no warning, no prior symptoms. The autopsy had ruled it a massive coronary. Natural causes. A tragedy, but these things happened. Jordan had been 24. Had just graduated college. Had helped me prepare dinner that night, eager to show off his cooking skills after a semester living on campus. I marinated the beef, Mom, he'd said, so proud. Special recipe I learned from a friend. And I had been so grateful for his company, so touched by his effort, that I hadn't questioned the faint chemical smell in the kitchen. Had written it off as cleaning products, as stress, as grief playing tricks on my exhausted mind. Could this be coincidence again? My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered with trembling hands. Mrs. Walter? Detective Chen. I wanted to update you before the information goes through official channels. Yes? The preliminary analysis came back on the cookie samples. High concentration of digoxin, a cardiac glycoside. Prescription grade, not something you'd find in contaminated food or natural sources. I see. My voice sounded distant, clinical. The nurse taking a report, not the mother facing the unthinkable. Mrs. Walter, I need to ask you something directly. Did you have access to digoxin in your nursing career? Yes. We kept it in the cardiac ward. Controlled substance, locked storage. And you never noticed any discrepancies? Missing inventory? The memory hit me like a physical blow. 23 years ago, not 20. Just before Robert died. A locker audit had shown 3 bottles of digoxin unaccounted for. There had been an investigation, finger-pointing, eventually written off as a documentation error. I had been the supervising nurse that month. Mrs. Walter? There was an incident, I said slowly. Years ago. Missing medication. But it was never proven that actual theft occurred. Could have been paperwork, mislabeled disposal. How many years ago? 23. A pause on the other end. Thank you for your honesty. We'll be in touch. The call ended. I stood in Jordan's kitchen, staring at the brown bottles in my hand, and felt the architecture of my entire life shift and crack. If Jordan had poisoned his father 23 years ago. If he'd stolen the medication under my supervision. If he'd let me believe it was natural causes, let me grieve and blame myself for not noticing warning signs. Then today's cookies weren't meant for Martha at all. They were meant for me. And whoever had planned this, my son, the boy I'd raised and loved and protected, had built in a failsafe. The missing medication was in my name. The cookies were baked in my presence. If Martha died, if I'd eaten that cookie and died, the investigation would point to the retired nurse with access to the poison, the woman visiting her son's house, the mother who'd somehow contaminated her own welcome home treat. Jordan hadn't just tried to kill me. He'd tried to frame me for it. My phone buzzed again. Jordan, texting, Martha's awake. Asking for you. Come back soon. I photographed the bottles from every angle, my hands steadier now. Photographed their position behind the coffee maker, the residue inside, the scratched-off labels. Then I wrapped them carefully in a dish towel and placed them in my purse. Through the kitchen window, the morning sun turned the lake into liquid gold, and somewhere in my memory, a 12-year-old boy stood in a hospital corridor, holding a crushed chocolate bar, whispering, "Why do they get all your time, Mom? I only get the leftovers." I had thought it was grief talking. A child processing his father's death. Now I wondered, had it been guilt? Or had it been the first sign of something far darker, a hunger not for love, but for ownership? A need not to share me, but to possess me completely, even if possession meant destruction? My phone rang. Detective Chin again. Mrs. Walter, one more thing. Does your son have a criminal record? No. Why? His fingerprints came back with a flag. He was questioned 2 years ago in connection with an incident at his workplace. A coworker became ill after a company potluck. Nothing was proven, but... She hesitated. I think you should consider staying somewhere other than your son's house tonight. I understand. After she hung up, I stood in the middle of that beautiful kitchen with its granite counters and lake views and poison hidden behind the coffee maker, and I understood something that made my chest ache with a grief deeper than widowhood. The child I'd loved was gone. Had maybe never existed at all. And if I wanted to survive the next 48 hours, would need to stop being Jordan's mother and become what I'd always been best at, a detective of the human body, following evidence instead of emotion. Even if that evidence led straight to my son. Even if the trail he'd laid pointed straight back to me. The house was empty when I returned from dropping the bottles at a private lab I'd found through a former colleague. Detective Chen had the police samples, but I needed my own confirmation. Something I could trust. Something that wouldn't disappear into bureaucratic channels if the investigation started pointing in directions that served someone else's narrative. Jordan had texted 20 minutes ago, staying with Martha through lunch. She's doing better. Love you. I had 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. His study was at the end of the upstairs hallway, a converted bedroom with lake views and built-in shelves lined with medical textbooks I'd given him over the years. Books he'd never read but always displayed prominently when I visited. The desk was neat, compulsively so. Inbox and outbox trays aligned. Pens sorted by color. A leather blotter centered perfectly. I'd raised a boy who organized his closet by color at age 7. Who alphabetized the spice rack without being asked. Who needed order, structure, predictability. Or so I'd thought. Now I wondered if what I'd mistaken for discipline had actually been control. The desk drawers weren't locked. Why would they be? I was his mother. Trusted. Beloved. The woman he'd supposedly baked cookies for. The first drawer held the usual detritus, stapler, tape, sticky notes. The second contained files neatly labeled, utilities. Car insurance. Warranties. The third drawer held a manila folder marked simply, Mom. My hands were steady as I opened it. The nurse in me had taken over, clinical and methodical, because if I let the mother surface, I'd break. The first document was a life insurance policy. $2 million. Beneficiary, Jordan Michael Walter. The policy was new, dated 3 months ago, right after I'd mentioned selling my house and moving closer to him and Martha. We should update your estate planning, he'd said over video call. Make sure everything's in order. "You're not getting any younger, Mom." I'd laughed it off. Signed the papers he'd sent. Trusted my son to handle the boring financial details while I focused on packing up 40 years of memories. Underneath the policy, bank statements. Jordan's accounts, not Martha's. 3 loans taken in the past 6 months, totaling nearly $200,000. Payment notices stamped overdue in red. Investment summaries showing catastrophic losses, cryptocurrency schemes, penny stocks, something called a guaranteed arbitrage opportunity that had evaporated $50,000 in 3 weeks. My son was drowning in debt. And his mother had just signed a policy that would save him if she died accidentally. I photographed everything with shaking hands. The camera flash felt obscene in the quiet room, like lightning illuminating a crime scene. Behind the financial documents, I found it. A composition notebook, the kind schoolchildren used. The cover was unmarked, but inside, written in Jordan's precise handwriting. Loyalty projects. The first pages were lists. My daily routine documented with disturbing accuracy. 6:30 a.m., coffee, black, 2 cups. 8 a.m., vitamins, calcium, D3, B-complex. 10 a.m., tea at home, water for errands. 3 p.m., tea, chamomile preferred. 7 p.m., wine with dinner, red, usually 1 glass. 9 p.m., medications, thyroid, blood pressure, sleep aid as needed. Beneath each entry, notes in red ink. Coffee, too many witnesses at diner. Kitchen at home? No, Martha uses same pot. Vitamins, possible replacement, but daily regimen inconsistent. Risk of wrong day. Tea 3 p.m., best option. Routine solid. Often alone. Can control preparation. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, forcing focus. The next pages were worse. Chemical formulas I didn't fully understand. Calculations of body weight versus dosage. Absorption rates for different delivery methods. And then, a section titled, Timeline. Week 1, Establish baking routine. M will think it's for her. Perfect cover. Week 2, Practice batches. Learn texture, smell, appearance. Needs to look normal. Week 3, Mention mom's visit. Build anticipation. Create narrative of special occasion. Week 4, Execution. Cookies during tea time. Will eat 2 to 3 typically. Dose calculated for certain fatality within 1 to 2 hours. Week 5, Grieving son. Tragic accident. Maybe blame the chocolates from Sullivan's? Or flour contamination? Below that, circled heavily. Insurance pays on accident, not suicide. Death must appear natural or accidental. No suspicion. And finally, at the bottom of the page, underlined 3 times. If questioned, medication missing under mom's supervision 23 years ago. She had access. She made the cookies. Her fingerprints on packaging. Her medical knowledge. Motive, guilt over dad? Depression? Let police build the story. The notebook slipped from my hands and hit the desk with a sound like a gunshot. He'd planned this for weeks. Months, maybe. Every smile, every phone call, every, I love you, Mom, had been scaffolding for murder. And he'd built a frame so elegant, so complete, that even if the poison was traced, even if someone suspected foul play, all evidence pointed back to the grieving retired nurse who'd lost her husband to mysterious heart failure 23 years ago. A woman with a history of missing medications. A woman with expertise in cardiac drugs. A woman who might have finally cracked under decades of guilt. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Chin, need to speak with you this afternoon. Some questions have come up. Can you come to the station at 3 p.m.? I glanced at my watch. 90 minutes. I photographed every page of the notebook, my hands mechanical, disconnected from the screaming in my head. When I finished, I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. Closed the drawer. Straightened the desk blotter. On the wall behind Jordan's desk hung a photograph from his medical school graduation. I stood beside him in the picture, beaming with pride, my arm around his shoulders. He dropped out 6 months later, citing stress and uncertainty about his calling. I'd supported his decision. Had never pushed or questioned. Now I saw the timing clearly, right after the first background check for hospital residency would have been initiated. Right before anyone might have started asking uncomfortable questions about gaps in his undergraduate record. Had there been others? Before Robert? Incidents explained away as accidents or misfortune? The question made me nauseous. Downstairs, I heard the front door open. Mom? You home? Jordan's voice, bright and relieved. The same voice that had called me after his first day of kindergarten, bubbling with excitement about shapes and songs and a friend named Timothy who shared his crackers. I forced my breathing steady. Closed the study door silently and moved to the top of the stairs. He stood in the foyer, still in yesterday's clothes, eyes red-rimmed but smile genuine. When he saw me, his whole face transformed with joy. Martha's doing so much better. They might move her out of ICU tomorrow. He bounded up the stairs and pulled me into a hug before I could step back. The doctors said it was a miracle she survived. That she was so lucky. His arms were tight around me, constricting. His chin rested on my shoulder, and I could feel his heartbeat against my chest, steady, calm, absolutely normal. Lucky, I repeated, my voice muffled against his shirt. If you hadn't switched that cookie. He pulled back, holding my shoulders, his eyes searching my face. You saved her life, Mom. I don't know what I would have done if, his voice cracked convincingly. If I'd lost her because of my stupid mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Jordan. The words were out before I could stop them. For a fraction of a second, something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, or calculation. Then it was gone, replaced by confusion. What do you mean? The police think the poisoning was deliberate. They're investigating everyone who had access to the cookies. I know. They questioned me again this morning. He released my shoulders and moved to the window, staring out at the lake. They asked about my finances. My relationship with Martha. Whether I had life insurance on her. A bitter laugh. Like I'd hurt my own wife. Do you? Do I what? Have life insurance on Martha? He turned, and for just a moment, I saw it, a flash of the calculation beneath the grief. Then he smiled, sad and exhausted. A small policy. 100,000. Standard stuff when you get married. He walked back to me, and there was something desperate in his eyes now. Mom, they're trying to make me look guilty. They asked if I resented you. If I felt abandoned after Dad died because you worked so much. Did you? What? No. Of course not. But his hands twisted together, and I remembered a 12-year-old boy in a hospital corridor, crushing a chocolate bar, whispering about leftovers and time. I should get ready, I said. Detective Chen wants to meet at 3. Why? Questions about the missing medication. From 23 years ago. Jordan went very still. That was never proven. Just bad paperwork. I know. Mom. He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to back away. You don't think I had anything to do with this, do you? The question hung between us, layered with meanings I was only beginning to understand. I think, I said carefully, that someone planned this very thoroughly. And I think the police are going to follow the evidence wherever it leads. Even if it leads to you. The words were soft, almost gentle. But underneath them, was that a threat? A warning? He hugged me again, and this time I felt the tremor in his arms, the hitch in his breathing. Real emotion or performance? I didn't know anymore. I could never survive without you, Mom, he whispered against my hair. You're all I have left. His grip lingered too long, tight enough to restrict my breathing. When he finally released me, his eyes were wet with tears. "Promise me you'll be careful," he said. "Promise me you won't do anything rash." "Like what?" "I don't know. You've seemed so stressed. So unlike yourself." Martha noticed it too. "We were worried about you even before." He stopped himself. "Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." "Let me take care of you." The words were kind. Loving. Everything a devoted son should say. And every instinct I possessed screamed danger. "I promise," I lied. He kissed my forehead and disappeared into the kitchen, humming something cheerful. I stood in the hallway, my phone heavy with photographs of evidence, my chest heavy with grief, and understood with perfect clarity. My son had murdered his father. My son had tried to murder me. And if I didn't move very carefully, very quickly, my son would succeed, and I would die with the world believing I'd committed suicide from guilt. The frame was already built. All he needed was to push me into it. Martha's guest room smelled of lavender and dust. I'd volunteered to prepare it for her homecoming, scheduled for tomorrow morning if her blood work remained stable. Jordan had been grateful, almost tearfully so, kissing my cheek before heading back to the hospital for evening visiting hours. "You're such a help, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words had felt like a noose tightening. I worked methodically, stripping sheets, wiping surfaces, trying not to think about the notebook upstairs or the meeting with Detective Chen that afternoon. She'd been professional, carefully neutral, asking about my access to medications, my relationship with Jordan, whether I'd noticed anything unusual about his behavior. "Mrs. Walter, we found your fingerprints on the cookie packaging." Of course. I helped put them on the plate. And on the chocolate chip bag in the trash. I was tidying the kitchen. The bag was buried under other trash. Deep in the bin. I had no answer for that. Couldn't explain how my fingerprints had migrated to places I'd never touched, unless Jordan had carefully orchestrated their placement using items I'd handled earlier. The frame was tightening. I moved to Martha's nightstand, organizing pill bottles and water glasses, when I noticed the bottom drawer didn't quite close flush. I knelt, jiggled the handle. Locked. A locked drawer in a guest room nightstand. The key was taped to the underside of the drawer above, a hiding spot obvious to anyone determined to find it. Inside, beneath spare reading glasses and bookmarks, I found a manila envelope. The label read, "Jordan, Therapy Notes. Private." My hands trembled as I opened it. Patient confidentiality meant nothing now. Martha had nearly died. If these notes contained anything relevant, any warning signs we'd all missed. The first page was a photocopy of an intake form dated 18 months ago. Patient name, Jordan Michael Walter. Referred by, self. Presenting issues, relationship anxiety, intrusive thoughts, childhood trauma. Patient reports feelings of abandonment stemming from early maternal loss. I stopped reading. Stared at those words. Early maternal loss. But I was alive. Had been present throughout Jordan's childhood, perhaps too present with my nursing schedule and double shifts, but never absent. Never lost. I read on. Patient describes mother as emotionally unavailable, stolen by her patients, and expresses persistent resentment that he never came first. Reports recurring fantasies of complete ownership and exclusive access to mother's time and attention. The therapist's notes, handwritten in the margins, possible obsessive attachment disorder? Recommend further evaluation. The next page was a session transcript from 3 months ago. Therapist, you mentioned last week that you've been having intrusive thoughts about your wife. Can you tell me more about those? Jordan, they're not about hurting her. Not exactly. It's more like, I need to know she won't leave. That she can't leave. T, what would prevent her from leaving? J, if she needed me. Really needed me. If I was the only one who could take care of her. T, that sounds like a need for control. J, it's protection. It's love. Jordan, we've talked about the difference between love and possession. J. My mother never loved me. Not really. She loved her patients. Her dying strangers got her best hours, her gentlest voice. I got the leftovers. The exhausted scraps. Do you know what that does to a kid? I think we should explore that. Tell me about your father's death. J. Long pause. It was sudden. Heart attack. He was fine 1 minute, gone the next. You were in your 20s? J. 24. I just graduated. How did your mother handle it? J. She worked more. Buried herself in patient care. Like Dad dying freed up even more time for strangers instead of me. Did you resent that? J. Wouldn't you? The page ended there. I turned to the next transcript, dated 6 weeks ago. You mentioned experimenting with chemistry in college. Tell me about that. J. Just basic stuff. I was pre-med for a while. But you dropped out of medical school after 1 semester. J. It wasn't for me. Or was it because the background check revealed inconsistencies in your undergraduate record? A lab incident involving another student? J. No response recorded. Jordan, I need you to be honest with me. These fantasies about control, about making people need you, have they ever moved beyond fantasy? J. I don't know what you mean. Your wife found digitalis in your study. She asked me about it in our couples session. You told her it was for research. J. It was. Research into what? J. Cardiac function. I was curious about Dad's death. 23 years later? J. Some questions don't have expiration dates. The therapist's note beneath that exchange, patient exhibits significant memory distortions regarding father's death. Admits resentment toward both wife and mother. Demonstrates concerning pattern of chemical, curiosity, and control fantasies. Recommend immediate psychiatric evaluation. Risk assessment, moderate to high. The final page was dated 2 weeks ago, just days before my planned visit. Martha told me you've been baking. That's new. J. I want to do something nice for my mother. She's visiting soon. How do you feel about her visit? J. Excited. Nervous. It's been years since we had real time together. What would real time look like? J. Just us. No distractions. No one else stealing her attention. Jordan, does Martha steal your mother's attention? J. Long pause. Sometimes I think about what it would be like if it was just Mom and me. Like when I was little, before she got so busy. Before everyone else became more important. That sounds like a fantasy of elimination. J. It's just a thought. Thoughts become actions, Jordan. We've discussed this. If you're having intrusive thoughts about harming. J. I would never hurt my mother. But Martha? J. Session ended early at patient request. Below that, the therapist had written in red pen, urgent, patient terminated therapy. Refused psychiatric referral. Wife expressed fears for her safety but unwilling to leave or involve authorities. Recommend she document all concerning behaviors. Have advised her to secure all medications and chemicals in the home. I sat on the edge of Martha's bed, the papers scattered around me, and felt the world reorganize itself into a new, horrifying shape. Martha had known. Had suspected, feared, tried to protect herself and me. That's why she'd copied these notes, hidden them where Jordan wouldn't find them but someone searching would. She'd left me breadcrumbs. And I'd been too blind, too loyal, too much of a mother to see them. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Walter? This is Elaine Pritchard. Martha's sister. I'd met Elaine once, briefly, at the wedding. A sharp-eyed woman who'd asked too many questions about Jordan's past and been brushed off as overprotective. Yes? I need to see you. Now. Don't tell Jordan. Her voice was tight with urgency. There's something you need to know about the pharmacy footage. 20 minutes later, I sat in Elaine's car in a grocery store parking lot, watching security footage on her laptop. The police won't tell Martha anything while she's recovering, Elaine said. But I have a friend in the prosecutor's office. He sent me this. The footage showed the interior of Sullivan's pharmacy, dated 3 weeks ago. A man in a baseball cap and surgical mask approached the counter. The timestamp read 4:47 p.m. Watch, Elaine said. The man placed items on the counter, cold medicine, antacids, hydrogen peroxide. And then, casually, he asked the pharmacist something. She shook her head. He persisted, pulling out his phone, showing her something on the screen. After a moment, she disappeared into the back room and returned with a small bottle. Elaine paused the video. That's oleander extract. Highly regulated. Contains cardiac glycosides similar to digitalis. The pharmacist said he claimed to need it for a research project, showed her a fake university ID. You can't see his face. No. But watch his hands. She zoomed in. The man's left hand had a distinctive scar across the knuckles, the same scar Jordan had gotten in high school, requiring 12 stitches after a cooking accident. That's not conclusive, I said, even as my chest tightened. There's more. Elaine pulled up another file. The fake ID he used? The name was Robert Walter. My dead husband's name. He's been planning this for months, Elaine whispered. Martha suspected. She told me at Christmas that something was wrong, that Jordan had become obsessive, controlling. She found chemicals in the garage labeled as fertilizer, but that smelled wrong. She found searches on their shared computer about untraceable poisons and accidental death insurance payouts. Why didn't she leave him? He threatened to hurt himself if she did. And she, Elaine's voice broke. She thought she could fix him. Thought therapy would help. She didn't realize how far gone he was. She was protecting me, I said quietly. She knew he was escalating. Knew I was visiting. The cookies weren't just about killing me, they were about removing the witness who might have started asking questions. Elaine nodded. And framing you in the process. Perfect crime. If you died, natural causes. If Martha died, grieving son who made a terrible mistake. If Martha died and you were blamed, she stopped. You're the only loose end. My phone buzzed. Detective Chen. Mrs. Walter, we need you to come to the station immediately. We found something in your vehicle. What vehicle? I said aloud. I took a taxi here. Elaine and I looked at each other. Your rental car, she said. The one parked at Jordan's house. We arrived at the police station 40 minutes later. Detective Chen met us in the lobby, her expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Walter, during a routine search of the property, we found 2 empty vials in your car trunk. They tested positive for digoxin residue. That's impossible. I haven't opened my trunk since I arrived. The vials have your fingerprints on them. Of course they did. Jordan must have taken them from my luggage, used items I'd touched, prescription bottles, maybe, or medical supplies I kept for emergencies. I didn't put them there. Then how did they get there? I had no answer that wouldn't sound paranoid or defensive. The frame was complete. My fingerprints on the bottles, on the cookie packaging, on the chocolate chips. The missing medication from 23 years ago. My access, my expertise, my presence in the house when Martha was poisoned. All Jordan needed now was for me to panic. To run. To act guilty. I want a lawyer, I said. Chen nodded. That's probably wise. In the station bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back was a stranger, exhausted, frightened, trapped in a nightmare of her own son's design. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photographs I'd taken. The notebook. The therapy notes. The pharmacy footage. Evidence that could save me or condemn me, depending on how it was presented. To prove my innocence, I'd have to destroy Jordan's life. Have to expose him as a murderer, a manipulator, a monster wearing my son's face. To save myself, I'd have to admit I'd raised him. Had missed every warning sign. Had been the emotionally unavailable mother whose neglect had somehow cultivated this darkness. Either way, I lost. I stared at my reflection and whispered the truth I'd been avoiding since I found those bottles behind the coffee maker. To save myself, I have to destroy my last illusion, my son. My phone buzzed. Jordan, texting, "Where are you, Mom?" Getting worried. "Please come home." Home. As if that house was anything but a trap. I turned off my phone, straightened my shoulders, and walked back into the station to begin the process of taking apart the life of the boy I'd loved more than anything. The boy who'd been planning to kill me with the same precision I'd once used to save lives. The recording device was smaller than a thumb drive, clipped to my bra strap where Jordan would never think to look. Elaine had provided it along with a promise. Detectives would be parked 2 houses down, monitoring the audio feed in real time. If he confesses to anything at all, we move in, Detective Chen had said. But Mrs. Walter, if you feel unsafe for even a second. I won't, I'd interrupted. Because fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. My son had murdered his father, poisoned his wife, framed his mother, and planted evidence with the precision of someone who'd been planning this for years. The only way to stop him was to let him believe he'd already won. Jordan had texted 3 times during my meeting with the police, "Please come home. We need to talk. I'm making your favorite, pot roast like Dad used to love." That last detail made my stomach turn. Dad's favorite meal, prepared by the son who'd killed him. I arrived at 6:30. The house smelled of rosemary and garlic, warm and inviting. Jordan met me at the door wearing an apron, his smile bright and guileless. "Mom." I was getting worried. He pulled me into a hug that lasted a beat too long. "You've been so distant today. Everything okay?" "Just tired." The police had more questions. Something flickered in his eyes, calculation masked quickly by concern. "About the vials in your car? You know about those?" Detective Chen called to ask if I'd seen you near your trunk recently. I told her you never use it. That someone must have planted them. He guided me toward the kitchen, his hand gentle on my elbow. "It's obvious what's happening, Mom. Someone's trying to frame you." "Who would do that?" He didn't answer immediately, just gestured for me to sit at the table already set with our good china, plates I recognized from my own kitchen, shipped here months ago when I downsized. The pot roast steamed between us, perfectly browned, surrounded by carrots and potatoes. "Remember Sunday dinners?" Jordan asked, serving my plate. "You, me, and Dad. Before the hospital consumed all your time. I was providing for us." "I know." His smile was sad. "I know that now. But when I was 8, 9, 10, all I knew was that other kids had mothers who came to school plays and packed lunches. I had leftover casseroles and babysitters. Jordan, we've talked about this. I'm not blaming you." He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. "I'm explaining. Trying to help you understand why I need you so much." The recording device pressed against my ribs. I forced myself to take a bite of pot roast, to chew and swallow while my son watched me with the intensity of someone conducting an experiment. "It's delicious," I said. "Dad's recipe. I found his old cookbook in the attic." Jordan's voice softened. "Did you know he wrote notes in the margins? Things like, Whitney's favorite and, made this the night Jordan was born. He loved you so much, Mom. I loved him too. Did you?" The question was gentle, curious. Because sometimes I wondered if his death was a relief. No more compromising your schedule. No more pretending to be domestic when you'd rather be saving lives. My throat tightened. Your father's death destroyed me. Not enough to quit working. Not enough to stay home with your grieving son. He took a sip of wine, studying me over the rim. But I forgive you. I've always forgiven you. There's nothing to forgive, Jordan. Isn't there? He set down his glass. Martha's sister came to see you today. Don't lie, I saw her car leave the station parking lot when I drove past. What did she tell you? I held his gaze. That Martha was afraid of you. That she suspected you were planning something. For a long moment, Jordan said nothing. Then he smiled, a real smile, almost relieved. Finally, he said. Finally, we can be honest. About what? About the fact that you know. That you've known since you found my notebook. He leaned back, utterly calm. You're not as subtle as you think, Mom. I saw the study door was ajar. Checked the drawer. Everything was exactly where I left it, except the dust pattern was disturbed. My heart hammered against the recording device. If you knew I found it, why? Because I needed you to understand. He stood, began pacing. The cookies weren't supposed to be for Martha. You weren't supposed to switch them. The plan was simple, you die quietly in your sleep after afternoon tea. Natural causes. An old woman with a heart condition, stressed from her daughter-in-law's hospitalization. I'd grieve appropriately, collect the insurance, pay off my debts, and keep Martha under control with the reminder that accidents happen to people who threaten to leave. The casual way he said it, like describing a grocery list, made bile rise in my throat. But you switched the cookies, he continued. Ruined everything. And suddenly I had to improvise, had to make sure you'd be blamed if Martha died, or make sure Martha stayed quiet if she survived. He turned to face me. Do you know how exhausting it is, constantly adjusting variables? You killed your father. Dad was going to make me get a job. Jordan's voice was matter-of-fact. Said I couldn't live at home forever, that I needed to grow up. He threatened to cut off my allowance, force me to be independent. I couldn't let that happen. So you poisoned him. Digitalis in his coffee over 3 weeks. Small doses, building up. His heart was already weak, the autopsy showed natural causes. You never suspected. No one did. Pride crept into his tone. I was 24 and I'd committed the perfect crime. And the missing medication from the hospital? Insurance. I knew someday I might need to frame you. Took the vials, kept them all these years. Your fingerprints were on them from when you'd handled the medication cart. Perfect evidence if I ever needed it. Through the window, I saw headlights turn off down the street. The detectives, moving into position. Why tell me this? I asked. Because you're leaving me. His voice cracked. You were planning to move to that retirement community in Arizona. You told me yourself, independent living, activities with people your own age. You were going to abandon me again. Jordan, that's not abandonment. That's... You don't get to decide. He slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. You don't get to leave me like everyone else. Martha wanted to leave. Dad wanted me gone. But you're my mother. You're supposed to stay. Supposed to? I stood slowly. Jordan, I'm a person, not a possession. You're my mother. Tears streamed down his face now. You owe me. All those years you gave to strangers, all those dying patients who got your kindness while I got scraps. You owe me everything. I gave you life. Love. Every opportunity. You gave me loneliness. His voice was raw, desperate. Do you know what it's like being 8 years old, eating cereal for dinner because mom's at the hospital? Being 12 and finding out from a neighbor that dad died because mom was too busy to come home? Being 24 and realizing your own mother values her career over your existence? That's not fair. Fair? He laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? I wasn't going to let Martha take you from me. I wasn't going to let some retirement home steal what little time you have left. The plan was simple: you die quietly, peacefully. I handle your estate, pay off my debts, and keep your memory perfect. No suffering. No lingering illness. Just sleep. That's not love, Jordan. That's murder. It's both. He moved toward me, and I saw madness in his eyes, the same madness I'd mistaken for grief after Robert's death. Don't you see? I love you so much I can't let you go. Can't let you choose anyone else. If I can't have you, at least I can control when and how you leave. The front door burst open. Detective Chen and 3 officers flooded in, weapons drawn. Jordan Michael Walter, you're under arrest for the murder of Robert Walter and the attempted murders of Whitney Walter and Martha Walter. Jordan didn't resist. Just stared at me as they cuffed him, tears streaming down his face. You recorded me, he whispered. You turned on your own son. You tried to kill me. I was going to make it painless. His voice rose to a scream. I was going to be gentle. That's love, Mom. I loved you enough to. Stop. The word cut through his hysteria. Just stop. At the station, they let me watch through one-way glass as Chen interrogated him. Jordan had waived his right to a lawyer, wanted to explain, needed someone to understand. I wasn't going to let her leave me, he told Chen, his voice small and broken. She was moving away. Everyone always moves away. Dad wanted me gone. Martha wanted a divorce. Mom was going to Arizona. I only wanted her with me. Is that so wrong? You tried to murder 3 people. I was protecting what was mine. He looked directly at the mirror, as if he could see me behind it. Mom, please. I'm still your son. I'm still the boy who needed you. Please don't leave me. Please. Chen glanced at the mirror, asking silently if I wanted to speak to him. I nodded. They brought me into the interrogation room. Jordan's face transformed when he saw me, hope and desperation and that terrible, suffocating love. Mom. You didn't lose your mother today, Jordan. My voice was steady, final. You killed her years ago, when love became control. When my value became measured by my availability. When you decided that owning me mattered more than loving me. That's not, I never. You murdered your father because he threatened your comfort. You tried to murder your wife because she threatened your control. And you tried to murder me because I threatened your fantasy of possession. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. The boy I raised died a long time ago. I just didn't want to see it. No. He lunged forward, but the chain on his cuff stopped him. I'm still him. I'm still your son. I baked you cookies. I called you every week. I loved you. You loved what I represented. Not who I am. Please. His voice broke completely. Please don't leave me. Don't abandon me like everyone else. I can't survive without you. Then you should have thought of that before you put poison in my tea. I stood. Walked to the door. Behind me, Jordan's screams shattered against the concrete walls, wordless, animal sounds of anguish that might have been grief or rage or the final death rattle of a delusion. Detective Chen met me outside. That was incredibly brave. No, I said. It was incredibly overdue. The morning air was cold and clean when I stepped outside the station. Dawn was breaking over the lake, painting everything gold and pink. Somewhere in the city, Martha was recovering, learning that her husband had tried to kill her. Somewhere behind me, my son was being processed into the system that would hold him accountable. And somewhere inside me, a weight I'd carried for decades, guilt over my career, my choices, my supposed failures as a mother, finally lifted. I'd done my best. Given my love freely. That Jordan had twisted it into something toxic wasn't my fault. Wasn't something I could have prevented by working fewer hours or packing more lunches or being whatever impossible ideal he'd constructed in his wounded mind. I pulled out my phone and called Elaine. "It's done," I said. "He confessed to everything. How are you holding up?" I thought about that. About the son I'd lost, or maybe never had. About the life I could finally build without the anchor of his need dragging me under. "I can breathe," I said. For the first time in years, I can breathe. Behind me, the station doors closed on Jordan screaming. Ahead of me, the sun rose on a day I'd almost never seen. I walked toward it, finally able to leave without guilt. Finally free. Spring came late to the lake that year. By the time the ice finally broke in early April, Martha had been home for 3 months, relearning how to trust the food she ate and the spaces she occupied. The house had been scrubbed clean, professionally, thoroughly, but she still sometimes caught herself holding her breath before taking a sip of tea. I visited on a Saturday when the air finally smelled of thaw instead of freeze. Elaine answered the door, flour dusting her hands. "She's in the kitchen," Elaine said. "We're baking. Therapeutic, the doctors say." The kitchen had been repainted, soft yellow instead of the cold white Jordan had preferred. New curtains, new dishes, new everything that could be replaced. Only the table remained from before, scarred oak that Martha had refused to part with. "It's the only thing in this house that never tried to kill me," she joked when I'd asked about it. She looked better. Still thin, still marked by the ordeal, but her eyes had light in them again. She was rolling dough when I entered, her movements careful and deliberate. "Whitney." She smiled. "Perfect timing. The cookies are almost ready." "I'm not sure I can." "I know." She wiped her hands on her apron. "But Elaine made these from scratch, measured every ingredient in front of me, and I watched them bake." Sometimes the only way to reclaim something is to face it directly. The cookies were chocolate chip, a deliberate choice, I realized. Taking back what Jordan had weaponized. We sat at the table with coffee and warm cookies, the lake visible through the window. Elaine joined us, keeping the conversation light, garden plans, book recommendations, the neighbor's new puppy. Normal things. Safe things. The kind of mundane chatter that forms the foundation of healing. Martha ate her cookie slowly, savoring it. When she finished, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "The trial's next month," she said quietly. "I know." "They asked if I'd testify." "If I'd..." She trailed off, staring at her coffee. "If I'd face him." "You don't have to." "I want to." Her voice was firm. "I want him to see what he did. Want him to hear me say that I survived him." Elaine squeezed her sister's hand but said nothing. "The prosecutor thinks he'll plead guilty," Martha continued. "Avoid trial. They have his confession, the recording, the pharmacy footage. His lawyer's negotiating for psychiatric treatment instead of general population. How do you feel about that?" She considered. "I think he is sick. I think something broke in him a long time ago, maybe when your husband died, maybe before. But being sick doesn't excuse what he did. Doesn't erase the fact that he looked me in the eye every morning while planning my death." I thought about Jordan in county lockup, where I'd visited once and only once. He'd begged me to advocate for him, to tell the judge about his difficult childhood, to explain that he was a victim of my neglect. I'd listened in silence. Then I'd stood and walked out without saying a word. "Do you ever think about forgiving him?" Martha asked now, her voice soft. The question hung in the air between us. Through the window, the lake glimmered in afternoon light, ice-free and alive with the promise of warmer days. "Forgiveness keeps a door open," I said slowly. "It says maybe someday, maybe if circumstances change, maybe if enough time passes. Some doors are meant to stay locked. But he's your son. He was my son." The past tense hurt, but it was honest. The boy I raised, or thought I raised, wouldn't have done these things. Wouldn't have looked at love as ownership. The man in that cell isn't someone I recognize anymore. Maybe he never was. Elaine cleared the table, giving us space. Martha watched her go, then turned back to me. I blamed myself at first, she admitted. Thought if I'd been more attentive, more submissive, if I'd quit my job and stayed home. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't take responsibility for his choices. I did that for months. Analyzed every decision I made, every shift I worked, every school play I missed. Convinced myself I'd created a monster through maternal negligence. And now? Now I understand that people aren't equations. You can't solve for mental illness by adjusting variables. Jordan's pathology isn't something I caused or could have prevented. It's something he chose to nurture instead of address. Martha nodded slowly. His therapist said he terminated treatment the moment she suggested he might need medication. Said he refused to admit anything was wrong, that everyone else was the problem. That sounds like him. We sat in comfortable silence, two women bound by shared trauma and the slow, painful work of recovery. Outside, a bird landed on the deck railing, the first robin I'd seen that spring. What will you do now? Martha asked. After the trial, after all this is over. I'd thought about that question for months. The retirement community in Arizona had held my deposit, waiting patiently while I dealt with lawyers and depositions and the wreckage of my family. My condo in Portland remained unsold, sitting empty while I tried to decide what came next. I'm going to Arizona, I said. Start over somewhere Jordan never touched. Make friends who only know me as Whitney, not as the nurse who raised a murderer. That sounds lonely. Maybe at first. But loneliness is better than captivity. I met her eyes. I spent 50 years defining myself through other people, patient, wife, mother. Always measuring my worth by how well I met someone else's needs. It's time to figure out who I am when no one needs saving. Martha smiled. I think I'd like that too. Elaine's been pushing me to go back to school, finish my degree. Maybe teach art. You should. Jordan always said it was a waste of time. That I should focus on keeping the house, on being available. Jordan was wrong about a lot of things. We talked until the light began to fade, sharing stories that had nothing to do with Jordan or poison or locked doors. We talked about Martha's painting, my plans to volunteer at a free clinic, the books we'd read and the places we wanted to see. We talked like survivors, not victims. When I finally left, the sun was setting over the lake, painting everything gold and crimson. I walked down to the dock where Jordan had proposed to Martha 7 years ago, where he'd promised to love and cherish her until death parted them. He'd meant it. That was the terrible thing. In his broken mind, murder was an act of devotion. I pulled the nursing locket from my pocket, the one my mother had given me when I graduated, the one I'd worn through decades of night shifts and emergencies and quiet moments of grace. Inside was a photograph of Robert holding infant Jordan, both of them smiling at something off camera. The locket had been in my car the night the vials appeared. Had Jordan touched it, used it to transfer my fingerprints? Probably. The police had returned it after processing, but I couldn't wear it anymore. Couldn't carry the weight of what it represented, identity and profession and the poisons that nearly destroyed me. I held it over the water, watching light play across its worn surface. For 50 years, I'd carried other people's burdens. Held hands through dying. Absorbed grief that wasn't mine. Built my entire identity around the act of saving. But Jordan hadn't wanted saving. He'd wanted consuming. And I'd almost let him. The locket slipped from my fingers. For a moment it caught the light, a bright flare against darkening water. Then it disappeared beneath the surface, ripples spreading outward and fading into stillness. I felt lighter. Emptier. Clean. Behind me, Martha's house glowed with warm light. Inside, she and Elaine would be cleaning up, planning dinner, moving through the ordinary rituals that stitch life back together after trauma. Tomorrow they'd wake up and do it again. And the day after. Small moments of normalcy building into something resembling peace. I turned away from the lake and walked back toward my car, each step a choice to move forward instead of looking back. The trial would come. Jordan would face consequences. The media would dissect our family, searching for explanations that would never quite satisfy. People would ask how I missed the signs, how a nurse could be so blind. I'd stop trying to answer. Some questions don't have tidy resolutions. What I knew now, what Martha knew, what we'd learned together in the aftermath of Jordan's betrayal, was that love without boundaries becomes its own kind of poison. That motherhood doesn't mean martyrdom. That survival sometimes requires the courage to close doors that were never safe to walk through. I drove away as stars emerged over the lake, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. In Arizona, I would build a new life. Make new friends. Find purpose that didn't require sacrifice. I would learn to sleep without listening for footsteps in the hall, to eat without analyzing ingredients, to trust that the people around me weren't plotting my destruction. It would take time. Healing always does. But for the first time in 50 years, I understood healing, not as curing others, but as choosing to survive them. Love, when blind to danger, becomes a slow poison. But truth, though bitter at first bite, is the only antidote. I drove through the night toward morning, leaving the locked door behind me, finally free.